Welcome to Vision Weekend. I'm really surprised and glad to see so many of you here so early. Some of you have seen the program already. Ce n'est pas le futur. It's kind of like a remix that I did from Blade Runner and Magritte. Magritte, of course, used this caption, "Ceci n'est pas une pipe," in one of his really famous surrealist paintings, where he drew a pipe, right, and then said "Ceci n'est pas une pipe" to kind of bring home the point that what you see there is not the pipe itself, but one representation of a pipe, right? And he meant with this that whatever you were seeing is not the real thing, but it's just one representation of it. And so similar with this kind of more dystopian vision of Blade Runner, right? This is just one representation of the future. It's merely representation, and it's one of many possible countless representations that we might make up, right? It's many possible future visions. And the cool thing is that we can decide which visions to choose. Unfortunately, kind of lately, most future visions have been quite depressing, very much so like this Blade Runner dystopia. And my work at Foresight is mostly focused on kind of AI and related existential risk research. And it is really quite sobering, because some of the known risks, like AI, get more serious right now than some of the old risks that we thought were in the past, like nuclear war, are kind of being brought back onto the table. And then there are some other kind of new types of risk popping up, like the new crisis around truth and having one common base reality that allows effective communication. So there are all these risks, and this makes one kind of seriously doubt whether we make it through the century in my day-to-day life. And it makes one kind of think of whether Nietzsche was right when he said, "In some remote corner of the universe, poured out and glittering in innumerable solar systems, there once was a star on which clever animals invented knowledge. That was the hardiest and most mendacious minute of world history, yet only a minute. After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star grew old and the clever animals had to die." I do think that considering risks and these kind of more sobering extinction scenarios is really important, right? But I can't help but thinking that they put the cart before the horse, because focusing only on negative visions of human extinction kind of misses the point that extinction is only so bad because the alternative is so good, right? The futures that we can create if we don't get wiped out are just beautiful beyond imagination. Nick Bostrom has this really beautiful letter from Utopia, where he imagines an imaginary being from the future that writes to humans now to ask them to bring Utopia into existence. And after describing all of the ways in which this being's life is so interesting and complex and worthwhile, he closes with this phrase where he says, and this is the being speaking, "We love life here every instant. Every second is so good that it would blow your mind had its amperage not been previously increased. My contemporaries and I bear witness, and we're requesting your aid. Please help us come into existence. Please join us. Whether this tremendous possibility becomes a reality depends on your actions. If your empathy can perceive at least the outlines of the visions I'm describing, then your ingenuity will find a way to make it real. Human life at its best is fantastic. I'm asking you to create something even greater. Life that is truly humane." So I think it's optimistic visions like these, right, that do something to you, that tickle a different part of your mind than this kind of neutral risk assessment or the kind of dystopian doomsday scenarios that we are currently occupied with. So I think that if we care about long-term future for sentient beings, then the best way to bring this about might not be by focusing in on all of the things that might prevent us from getting there, but on the visions that remind us of why we absolutely have to get there. So I created an index, which you can access right now. It's called existentialhope.com. The purpose of this index is to kind of turn this existential angst that we have, this focus on risk, which can lead to this fatalism and non-action, into existential hope. And that is really motivating you to act. So this index is really a collaborative consortium of readings, podcasts, videos, projects, and organizations that inspire a long-term positive vision for humanity, one with existential hope. And it's divided into 3 sections. So we have the vision section, and in this first section, I really talk about, lay out a vision of why we should care about the long-term future and where we might be if we overcome all the risks that we're so worried about. Then section 2 tackles focus areas, right? So here I divide the grand visions into like specific areas like science and technology, AI and cyberspace. And then you can click on it, and if it's loading, it should bring us to a Google Doc of where you can actually comment on the Google Doc. And everyone has commenting rights and can comment on the side, just click the comment button and comment if you have something to add. And then the third one is, now that we know like the focus areas, what are some tools that are kind of meta tools that individuals can learn right now that are effective to create effective change across a variety and across the whole board of all of these focus areas to create the visions that we want to. So part 1 really sets the vision, parts 2 the problem domain, and part 3 sets the toolkit that can be applied to make these visions reality. And I would love personally for this index to serve as a kind of knowledge graph for this weekend. So many of the pieces that we will discuss on the panels are listed in the respective focus areas. For example, right now, the living longer and better one will be the one for the next panel. And so there's really no need to take notes because many of the topics that we will discuss, I listed the readings that we will be discussing already in this index. I will make an effort to point out which readings are on there so you don't have to take notes. But however, there will hopefully at least, right, be a lot of new stuff as well. So whenever you hear a new piece discussed on the panel, whether it be a paper, an organization, or a podcast, or a project that is relevant, right, but is not on the list yet, then please just make a comment, right, go on this document, hit the comment button on the side of the doc, mention that item, and I will try to add it later. And the same goes for your stuff too. So if you know of pieces that should be on this index but that aren't, or that if you hear a conversation here on the corridor, and someone talking about new exciting stuff that is not on this index yet, please just make a comment to the doc and I'll sort it out. The list is really in its infancy. I'm not an expert by far on most of the topics, and I really need your help to populate the sections. Some sections are really still entirely left blank. So the goal is really to create a knowledge index of all positive future visions so that people have an overview of how the future could be changed and then can self-select toward the visions that they want to make a reality in the next year, in the year after, and hopefully in many more years after that to come. But it should also serve as connector, right? So if you see someone that commented here on the doc with a piece that you find interesting over the weekend, right, then just drop them a note in the comment section or just write them an email and meet up. You're all in one room today, right? You can just meet for coffee. And please don't be shy, right? So combined in this room, there's plenty of insane visions fueled by really insane brain power, right? So please let's share them, let's index them, and let's get to work on them. Ultimately, it's really upon us to create the visions that we want, right? And that are serving on the long run. We might say, well, Christian philosophy tells us that from dust we came and to dust we shall return, and it tells us that we each are an infinitesimal speck on the spectrum of geological time, insignificant by nature, and again in nature. And that's one vision, right? That's one vision of us. But there's another vision too, right, which is about the same reality. And that's by Marshall Savage. And he says, teetering here on the fulcrum of destiny stands our own bemused species. The future of the universe hinges on what we do next. If we take up the sacred fire and stride forth into space as the torchbearers of life, this universe will be a borning. Because of us, the barren dust of a million billion worlds will coil up into the imposing magic forms of animate matter. Slag will become soil, grass will sprout, and forests will spring up in once sterile places. A whole frozen universe will thaw and transmogrify, from howling desolation to blossoming paradise. Dust into life, the very alchemy of God. So let's take this weekend really to not settle for the former vision, but strive for the latter, for this vision. We can decide whether it's dust into dust or dust into life. So let's shift the focus from existential risk into one of existential hope, to really envision the futures that are worth fighting for. So with that being said, let's start the first panel.